Welcome to a new edition of See What's On, Central Maine's radio arts magazine, brought to you by Community Productions and Mix 107.9. It's Sunday, November 6, 2016. I'm your host, Dick Dyer. Each week, we scour the region and highlight the new and the unique arts happenings wherever they might occur. From Bangor to Lewiston, from Farmington to Rockland, from lounges to formal theaters, from galleries, festivals, libraries, movie houses, and maybe even your own home. If it's on, it's on. See what's on. Last week, we introduced you to Mike Miclon, the Executive Artistic Director of Johnson Hall in Gardiner. This week, we sit down to finish our conversation with him about the future of this historic theater. In addition, this week, we start an exclusive interview with Maine's legendary jazz clarinetist, Brad Terry, to talk about his career, a new book about his life, and to listen to some great jazz. This segment of See What's On is brought to you by SBS Carbon Copy, located on Main Street in Waterville. SBS is a family-owned business and has always been a strong supporter of the arts and community development. Visit them at mainprintingservices.com. And welcome back. We're again with Mike Miclon of the Johnson Hall. And we've talked about the season. We've talked about the history.
Right.
What a grand history it is. And you're bringing it back.
We are.
Making it the place for the community again.
Yep.
And grand plans for the future.
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing because every time when I introduce shows, I always go, technically you're not in Johnson Hall. You're in the, where they are actually now where we see shows was the old livery. It smells much better now. But they're in our studio theater. But the real Johnson Hall is on the third floor. The historic theater's on the third floor. And like I said, it's built in 1864, beautiful space. And when everything's said and done, right now our studio theater holds about 117 seats, pretty much max. When we get done on the third floor, it will be a 400-seat theater, balcony, elevator, state-of-the-art theater. Will be able to show films and simulcasts, as well as very high-end national touring acts coming through. So when I took the job, that was my board wanted to know, what's your vision? And I've watched, like a lot of people have watched, because I came up to Johnson Hall in the 80s as a teenager with Benny and Denise Reel to help dig out that first floor where the livery was and turn it into the studio theater and help do some of the work as a volunteer. So I've watched Johnson Hall over the past nearly 30 years. And like a lot of people going, when's that big theater going to get done? And what we always say, and I believe it's true because, you think about it, everything really happens in the time that it takes. It's taken this long because we weren't ready. Or the place wasn't ready. We built our reputation, we built our donor base, we built our ideas of what we wanted to do. And then I get to kind of come in and back clean up, as I say. It's a great position to be because all the people before me did so much work to get Johnson Hall on a stable. We've always been a run in the black, been a very fiscally responsible organization, tried to always present top quality things. And then what I did when I came in is just took all of that, amped it up a bit, and really got our downstairs humming. But the real focus of me taking the job was the idea that I wanted to help lead the charge to get the third floor done. So my board, in September of 2013, we did a major strategic planning session and really set the goal and said, our goal before we left there, we said we want a year. And we said 2019 is when we want to reopen that space. And the great news is that everything that we've done from there to now, we are absolutely right on track to reopen Johnson Hall, the historic theater of Johnson Hall, by 2019. That's huge. It's a $4.3 million project. What Kennebec Savings is doing is buying $750,000 of the federal tax credits, and then we'll be taking the $850,000 of the state. And it's complicated, but it's an amazing program designed to keep these historic buildings and get them. So that really put us a major step forward. Plus, Kennebec Savings made a $100,000 cash donation, and then they're going to be helping us with all of our financing. They'll do the construction loan. They'll do a loan against pledges, all of those things. So we're building, and it did exactly what we hoped, is now that we have that gift, people are now coming up and stepping up and making sizable gifts towards the campaign because they know it's happening.
It's for real.
And that's the key. That's everything. We've got our architectural drawings. We've got our schematics where one of our longtime supporters and committee members said, we've built this organization for 30 years. We built it to be a sound organization. And it sounds funny to say, but he said, but all we have left to do is raise the money. It's been an amazing process. But now I'm getting excited, right?
Because I can see that.
It's like when someone's getting ready, they've been approved to buy a house and you got to go find, we're at that that point where it's like we're waiting for a few more dollars to come in, and then it's really we get to start construction. And that's the part that I can't wait for.
And it's 2019.
It's not too far away. So we know that construction's got to begin in the early months of 2018 to hit our mark, but we feel very confident that we're going to be able to do that.
Good.
So, yeah.
Good. It sounds like it. And thanks to Kennebec Savings Bank.
They really came to us and said, we believe in what you've been doing. They've been very excited to see what we've done over the last 3 years. And they said, we believe in it and we're in.
And I like the fact that we're putting creative energy into the fundraising element of it, because bringing the historic, though they're complicated, it is a great way for investors to get involved.
It really is.
And to their benefit as well as to the nonprofit.
Exactly. And that's really what that program is designed to do, because, historic buildings is always a lot of work to get them, compliant for handicap access, for fire code, all of those things. In order to, they know that there's so much involved in that. And that's major chunk of everything that we have to do. But they want to make sure that these buildings stay historic, stay in use, but still are compliant with everything that they need to do. So this really is that incentive program that benefits everybody, like you say.
Well, and it takes it full circle. It takes it back to that history. It was built because there was a community need for a performing space.
Exactly.
To gather and to hear great lectures and to be entertained. And in so doing, you actually stimulate the entire economy for the entire community.
Absolutely.
And the immediate region. It is a regional performing arts space.
Absolutely. And that's the great thing about it, too, is that I encourage everybody. I mean, obviously, we know that we're in a digital world now, and it's like everything is at your fingertips. Literally, grab your phone and you can watch a movie. I always go, you watch a movie that they spent millions of dollars to create so you could see it on the big screen, and we watch it on a, on a 2.5 by 4 inch screen. But what I always encourage people to do is to think back to those live experiences that they've had. What live theater does in a different way, you realize when you're sitting in that audience that you impacted the show. Your applause, your laughter, or your silence impacts the performance.
Totally does.
And it changes. If it's a comedy show and you sneeze, that could lead to things that didn't happen before. If you make a request during a show, a live show, then that person sings that song. You can't do that with your screen as much as it is on demand. And then what I also find is that when people talk about bringing their kids to live shows and the conversations around the dinner table or the ride home about what they just experienced together is very different, because people's movie taste, a lot of times, it's so individual now. You put your headset on, you don't experience music with everyone else. Everybody goes in 6 different places and watches something different on a different screen. But that live experience, I mean, I started my apprenticeship when I was 14 and knew that the live experience is something I wanted to do for the rest of my life, because it changed my life. And I knew that watching people in the audience and watching that interaction, it's something that just sticks with you a little bit longer.
And it's going to sound corny, but it really is magic.
It is magic. I mean, because you think about it, when you watch a movie, you can watch it next week, but that live performance was a once in a lifetime experience. And to me, it is the magic of a live performance that draws me back to it. And I go, keep all your digital stuff, do whatever you got to do. That's great. But do yourself the favor of actually experiencing live theater. I mean, as many times as you can, and as many times with your family or with your spouse, or that shared experience is so unique. I always say to my staff, I said, our product is not even necessarily the arts as much as it is the memories. And I know that sounds super corny, but it's the only way I can explain it, is that why people become regular customers of ours, they may see 10 different shows. So it's not just the artist. It's the experience of it. And so we do everything we can to go from when you call to get tickets and you talk to Pam. Pam will treat you like gold. She's a sweetheart. When you come to the show, when we introduce, we're going to interact, our volunteers. We want to make sure that experience, not to mention the show, is as personal as it can be. And that's what live theater does.
Fabulous. Well said.
Thank you.
Thank you, Houdini.
Thank you.
Thank you, Houdini, for making this week possible.
Yes.
And thank you to everybody involved with Johnson Hall, including our guest today, Mike Miclon.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you coming in.
This was great.
Very, very informative.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Well, that was the unmistakable sound of William Bradford Terry Also known as Brad Terry to Mainers.
And in Poland, Bradski.
And Bradski Terry in Poland, where he often plays. It's our special guest in the studio today, Brad Terry. Often referred to as Maine's jazz legend.
Oh, God, I don't know. I'm not that old, am I?
Well, what was that line you gave me about if you'd known you were going to...
If I'd known I was going to live this long, I would have taken myself more seriously.
There you go.
That's George Burns.
George,
I can't take credit for that.
You won't take that credit. Okay.
Yeah.
It's fitting. We're going to have some fun today.
Absolutely.
And probably carry on for some time here with Brad about his life in jazz, starting in the early days of Connecticut. We'll take a trip over into Poland a little bit as part of this, and we'll talk about his book, which is out. I feel more like I do now than I did yesterday, which is a tantalizing title.
Yeah, because I don't think it makes any sense at all, which my life doesn't make any sense either, so that's why I did it.
Well, you're telling me an interesting story about your mom in the early days in Connecticut, and you were having real troubles in school. I gather to say you were not necessarily a good student?
I was a non-functioning student. I was very good.
You're very good. Okay.
I was very good, but I was a non-functioning student.
In the days before ADA?
ADD.
ADD.
Yeah, it was not diagnosed for years and years and years. And I wasn't diagnosed with it till I was 58 years old.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I thought everybody's brain sort of was scrambled around this way.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't know.
And what does that mean musically, Brad? Because I think it's important. Well, back to your mom's story there, but what does that mean to you musically? How's your brain work with music?
I have no idea.
I love that.
I have no idea. I blow air through one end of this thing and see what comes out the other, and I bend notes and play out a tune, and I just try and play what I hear in my head. And I have really no idea what it is.
But it's more than just being self-taught, because you think differently, your brain works differently about music.
Yeah, to a certain extent. To me, it's like a second language. I use the analogy of a 5-year-old kid who talks in sentences. And he can't spell the words or read the words or diagram or know anything about grammar, but he can talk to you. Pretty much, I think the way I play music is the way a 5-year-old talks. I have vocabulary of tunes that I've learned, and all the music that I've listened to all my life is my vocabulary. Mm-hmm. And I string the ideas together based on what I hear in my head, and I don't have to necessarily know the name of the chord or the mode that I'm playing or the type of scale that's being played. I don't need to know any of that stuff because I just hear it in my head. Any more than if you're having a conversation, you're not aware of the spelling of the words as you're talking. Mm-hmm. The words just come out. I've been at it long enough. I've developed a pretty good vocabulary, which means somewhere in the neighborhood of 800 or 900 tunes that are buzzing around in my head that I know, and that's my vocabulary. Mm-hmm. And I explain to kids that, they say, oh my God, 800 tunes. Well, high school kids know 10 or 12,000 words.
Sure.
Big deal. So I've been at it 60 years, so I know 1,000 tunes. Big deal. It's not even a tune a week for crying out loud. Nothing to it. It's nothing to it. So it's not some kind of a magic thing that I think is only very few people are able to do. I think anybody can do it if they start with the idea you want to learn vocabulary. Most words that kids use in their everyday speech, those words don't come out of a vocabulary book. They learn them on the fly. Mm-hmm. They heard people say it, they learned what they mean, and they learned them. So in the same way that I'm incapable of reading music books anyway. I can't do that. Mm-hmm. My mother used to play all the great tunes of the 20s and 30s on the piano when I was pillows and blankets underneath the grand piano at home.
Okay.
I went to sleep there every night, and I know all those tunes.
Mm. And in those early days, though you struggled with reading and some of the more perfunctory elements of schoolwork, you, as I recall, you were talking about getting onto a recorder?
Yeah, I played first a soprano recorder. I had 3 older brothers, and they all played the piano, and my mother played the piano. And so there was a lot of competition, and I had to have something portable. When I got my clarinet, I was delegated to the chicken house. I wasn't allowed in the house at all for a couple of years, and which is right, because I think I sounded just like the chickens. It was okay.
In the early days.
Yeah, and so I had to develop something else.
And this started with your mom having a conversation with a neighbor down the road?
With a very famous clarinet player, as a matter of fact, by the name of Benny Goodman.
Benny Goodman.
Yeah. He was a couple of miles away, and Mother met him somewhere, and she was fearless. She'd talk to anybody. She was perfectly fine. And said, what do? I got this kid who does nothing except doesn't do schoolwork. All he does is sit around and play the recorder by ear. What do I do? And Benny said, get him a clarinet. I was off at boarding school at an early age. My parents were involved in international business, and they had to travel, and I was shipped off to boarding school in 4th grade. I think it was 7th grade spring vacation. The local store if you bought the instrument, they gave you 3 free lessons, and that was it.
That was it.
Yeah. I mean, my academic career was already floundering, and it was the beginning of my music career simultaneously.
Hard to know it at that time, and then you fast forward to a time when you were performing in a nightclub with a couple of other...
No, with my first concert.
First concert.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that when I'm talking to kids about stage fright, which is a real thing.
Sure.
I had a trio with a piano player and a drummer, and we had been memorizing right off the Benny Goodman records some of his tunes, the Benny Goodman trio things with Teddy Wilson and Gene Krupa. Note for note, we had them all down, and I memorized Benny's solos note for note exactly. I was in over my head technically, because it was difficult for me. The announcer came on and said, Brad Terry, Fred Fisher, Mickey Earnshaw will now recreate the famous Benny Goodman trio. And the lights came up, and in the front row with my mother and father and Benny Goodman and his wife. And I played it without a missed note, and I've never had a touch of stage fright since. And, playing with Dizzy Gillespie and Merrill Hall, playing all over the place with all kinds of people, playing at this International Clarinet Festival, opposite Buddy DeFranco, all these people, cool as a cucumber. It's part of the teaching philosophy of, in order to perform, for me, 2 ingredients. You have to plan on having a good time, and you have to plan on giving 100%. And if either one of those ingredients are missing, I don't want to be there. And so what happens is that if people come and they pay their money, they're going to hear 100% of me. They might not be hearing the best clarinet player in the world, but they'll hear the 100% of me. And that I have nothing to fear at that point.
We'll return to our interview with Brad Terry right after these commercial messages. Welcome back. You're listening to See What's On Mix 107.9. You can hear recent shows that you may have missed on SeeWhat'sOn.com. That's the letter C, What's On, or on Facebook.com, Arts in Central Maine. Please take the time to send us your story ideas and calendar listings for upcoming arts events. We'll now join Brad Terry for the rest of our interview for today, but we wanted to start with this amazing intro into Rhapsody in Blue from Brad Terry Plays Gershwin. We think you'll agree it's one of the most amazing presentations of chromatic scale on clarinet that you've ever heard. You had another mathematical formula that I loved when we talked earlier at the Maine International Conference on the Arts, but you were talking about the 60-40 rule.
Well, this is something I've sort of recently come to grips with. I've had some pretty good success playing duos with some pretty remarkable people, including Lenny Breau, who's one of the all-time great guitar players of all time. It seems to me any kind of musical conversation, and perhaps any conversation, should be a 60-40 relationship, 60% listening. And if each person is 60% listening, what happens in the middle is magic.
It's a great metaphor for life.
I think it makes sense. I'm sort of trying to, this is a fairly new theory of my floating around.
Well, I think you're going to keep playing with that theory.
Well, yeah. And I think I know my instrument enough, so I'm not really thinking, oh, God, I've got to push this key or I got to do this right now. And I'm able to listen to my partner and catch what he's doing and throw it back at him. My nephew had a wonderful line. He said that the kind of playing I do with a partner is like a rapid-fire, non-competitive tennis match.
Okay.
And what you want to do is zing the ball over the net with an interesting spin right where the other guy can get it and spin it back to you and just get it going like crazy. And it gets very, very interesting. Nobody's trying to compete.
Right.
But you want to spin this idea back and get the idea and get the conversation really flying back and forth. I like that analogy.
Mm-hmm. So, and that's really, in essence, the raw element of jazz in your mind? Or
For me.
For you, okay.
Yeah. Well, and it's the raw element of what you and I are doing right now.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure which part I'm doing right now. I hope I'm doing more of the 60%.
Well, I'm hoping to be listening to you because I don't want to start all of a sudden talking about, cement mixers or something.
Exactly.
For no apparent reason.
Well, and if we do that, that's okay too. We'll go with that for a bit and see where it ends up. Speaking of cement mixers,
we are. Okay. Well, that's a fast switch, isn't it?
Let's go back a little bit. I mean, you were in Connecticut and evolved your musical career there to some extent, including that legendary concert with Benny in the audience. Yeah. And he didn't chastise you or criticize you.
No, and later on I had a couple of, I think 3-hour-long sessions with him at his studio in Stamford, which were non-productive because first of all, he was impatient as a teacher, and he was asking me to do stuff that I just couldn't even begin to do. I was 17 or 18 and I couldn't come close to doing what he wanted to do. But the minute the lesson was over, we'd go out and we'd take a swim and, I'd tinker with his, not a cement mixer, but he had a golf cart that needed repairs.
Okay.
And I'd go tinker with that and get it running, and we'd have a very nice social time. Completely different character outside of the studio than he was in the studio.
You took it very seriously, obviously.
Yeah.
And then you moved on and you eventually landed up in Maine.
I was in New York till the early 70s. Living in Connecticut, trying to play, was sent in the Army. I did all kinds of different things in different places. Landed a job. I had a gig at a ski resort in Vermont. I had started a boys' camp when I was about 21 years old. And I recruited a kid that I met skiing. His parents turned out to be dean of faculty at the Riverdale School in New York. After 2 summers at camp, they liked what was going on, and they offered me a job. Mm-hmm. And he was head of the English department. He put me in the English department. And, I am a high school dropout, for God's sake. I can't spell. He gave me 2 7th-grade English classes, and all my kids spelled better than I did. It was pretty funny. I knew that they were reading my comments. When I commented on their compositions, I'd write stuff in the back, and they would come back with my spelling corrected. So I knew they were reading my stuff. And I was there for 5 years. Mm-hmm. And then the new headmaster came in and said, who is this guy? He's running a woodworking shop. He's working out with the wrestling team. He's playing music. He's doing all these different things, teaching English. But there are no little letters or initials and things behind his name. It just says Brad Terry. And they offered me, you can run your shop and salad bowls and this week and salt shakers next week, take grades and give attendance records. And I bailed out and came to Maine. Mm-hmm. Went to an alternative school in New Gloucester. And taught there for a couple of years. Figuring pretty much jazz I wasn't going to be doing it anymore. And I found out about the Bridgeway sessions in Portland with Don Doan, who became a very, very good friend. He, I think, got me connected up with the Augusta Music Society, which was, I don't know if that's still in existence anymore, but they got me to come up and play a concert, and the other person was Lenny Breau, who I didn't know anything about. Some people seem to have heard about him, but I didn't know anything about him. And we met, and it was a magic situation right away. So,
and that led to some albums, and
it led to what is known as the living room albums, the complete living room tapes, which are out there. These are all live recordings with Lenny and me, no rehearsal, no planning,
and those are
just everything straight ahead. And his guitar playing is, a couple of tunes on there are considered to be some of his best recordings ever. Mm-hmm. He was just a remarkable genius.
Available through Art of Life Records, I believe you said.
Yeah, it's Art of Life Records, and if you just type in me online,
it'll come up. In fact, we played a couple of weeks ago on this show one of the tunes from that album with Lenny. Yeah, with you and Lenny. Fascinating. It's kind of interesting because you had those technical skills, and I think you shared with me that your one of your relatives, Terry, from Terryville, Connecticut, you believe. The naming founder's name.
Yeah, well, old Eli Terry.
Terry
was a clockmaker, very well known.
So this tinkering, hands-on.
Yeah. I've been fooling around putting big engines in small cars and doing all that kind of crazy stuff all my life. Yeah.
So from a clockmaker to making your own kind of music.
Yeah. And today I've reached the incredible level of locking my keys in my car, which is the first for me.
That's the first.
It's a new dimension. I think,
Thank God for AAA, right?
Thank God for AAA. I mean, I think that's an evolution of sorts.
Right.
I've never done that before.
But you told a great story about how, as you were teaching yourself, and again, you're self-taught, but you had this uncanny ability to hear music in ways probably that other people didn't necessarily.
I don't know if it's any different. It's just that the little voice that most people have telling them to get off at the next exit is music lines. Very often my brain is completely cluttered up with all kinds of just melodies buzzing around. And so I play that way. Sometimes I make up stuff just out of whole cloth.
You got an example for us?
Yeah. I mean, this is not something I've ever played before, and I can never play it again.
Okay.
And okay, backing up just a bit, it's like a conversation. We could meet tomorrow and have this same session and set it up, but it would be a different conversation.
Okay.
There's no way we could do it unless we scripted it and read it, because it would have to be by definition different. So if I play something now, it's gone, it's out there.
So here we have an original.
I don't know what's going to happen here. I was thinking of a tune, but I'll try to get rid of that idea right away.
We'll call that one the Schumann Suite.
The Schumann Suite. Okay. No, those are the kind of things that buzz through my head all the time.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. We'll take a break and come back, and we're going to talk. I want you to tell the story about the bathroom lesson. Let's turn now to another tune from Brad Terry Plays Gershwin. Here is Summertime. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this week, so we'll return next week with more of our interview with legendary Brad Terry and the bathroom lesson. Thanks again to Mike Miclon and Brad Terry. I would also like to say a special thanks to Gatsby for technical assistance in producing this show here on 107.9 The Mix. My partner Gary Poulin and I hope you reach out to us on Facebook and visit our website at seewhatson.com. Remember, that's the letter C, whatson.com, and share that with your friends. We look forward to seeing you next Sunday for more features about the arts in Central Maine. That's it for me. Hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and remember, if it's on, See What's On.